Hey, welcome in.
Welcome to the Arrowhead Addict podcast.
We are here coming to you live.
Let me tell you, the dopamine, it's flowing.
I am damn excited. Damn excited.
We are so excited to be joining you guys tonight.
Oh! Well, how you doing, man? Patrick.
Will Sterling.
Yeah.
Super Bowl champion, two-time Pro Bowler, and Trent Green. Trent Green, how you doing?
Hey, what's going on, guys?
Oh, he picked it up! He picked it up! He's gonna
And we'll see you next week. But until then, as always, go Chiefs.
Welcome to the Arrowhead Addict podcast on this Tuesday. Sterling Holmes, Josh Brisco, and we have news. Yeah, baby. Trey Smith signing that extension 4 years, basically $70 million guaranteed, $94 million, large contract, record-setting contract, and there were still hours. It technically was hours. It was 2 hours before the deadline to officially have it done by, so we can say hours plural. No rush. No rush at all. Of course, just keep us on edge. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. But we have all that to talk about because they did it before 3 o'clock. So, yay, we're here now. Brisco, how you doing, my man?
Not as well as Trey Smith is doing, but I can't complain. I can't say I'm getting any giant signing bonuses today or that I know where exactly my NFL future is headed, but I'm having a pretty good day, all things considered. I actually, as the Trey Smith deal was about to be reported, I was locking in on my project for the afternoon, which was eliminating not one, but 2 wasps' nests from windows around my house. So I will say no stings this year so far. Made the moves that I needed to make, and the Chiefs and Trey Smith made the moves they needed to make. So everybody's, I think, happy, except for those wasps.
Let's hope the Chiefs are not going into a wasp's nest with this contract because it is, again, record-setting. Let's get into the numbers because I want to talk all about the contract, what it means going forward, and obviously I have a lot of thoughts, especially in regards to the Joe Thuney comparison, which I think is going to be a very, very fascinating conversation to have as we'll see unfold over the next few seasons. Here are the official details according to Albert Breer. $46.75 million fully guaranteed, but $70 million injury virtual guarantee. So it's $70 million guaranteed. Trey Smith, I don't think is going to do anything idiotic or anything detrimental to the Chiefs organization. From all accounts, what we have seen seems like a great guy. So $70 million injury and virtual guarantee. It's a little interesting structure now because here is how the cap hit breakdown transpires. A little different than how the Chiefs traditionally go about this. And quite frankly, I'm a fan of this. I thought this was interesting and I liked it. They're almost front loading this contract. And front loading is a strong word because it's just more in year 1 versus year 2, while years 3 and 4 are even. But $27 million this year, which makes sense because they were already, with him on the books, about $10 million of wiggle room, right? So why not use about $4 or $3.5 million of that dollars and just throw it towards his contract now? Yeah, you still have to sign Omar Norman Law, and maybe there'll be a couple of roster cut-down guys for pickups in the back into your roster. Sure, but you're not signing any big-name guys at this point in the season. You're not signing any guys where that monetary value would really move the needle. So why not just almost front-load part of that to Trey Smith this year? So $27 million in 2025, $20 million in 2026, and then $23.5 million in 27 and 28. Let's start here, Brisco. Do you like the way that was worked out?
The specific annual values or kind of the whole thing? It's an important clarification. I'm not just being pedantic.
No, agreed. Let's start with how it's actually written out. Let's start with that because I do think the slight front loading, I think, has made someone who was a little on the fence about this, which I still am.
Yeah,
I it's more palatable in my mind.
I'm with you there. First of all, I love being pedantic, so I have to clarify whatever you ask. And I'm with you there, kind of on the fence, generally speaking. But I think the structure makes sense. Now, look, if they would have backloaded it, I'd love to get a good answer from Brett Veach on this, and I think he might. Most of the time, it doesn't really behoove NFL general managers to tell the truth to the media. It's something that Veach has kind of figured out over his many years at the helm here now. But I think if you backload it, you could roll that money over and you have a little bit of that into the future. But what we figured out with the cap rising is that this year's dollars are worth a little bit less next year because it's a percentage of the cap. It's technically $1 million on this year's cap is more money than it would be next year, if that makes sense. Because again, the cap is always rising. The price is always going up, which also means that, look, I think this is, I guess, sort of getting back into the other half of how you feel about it now. But if you said, hey, is Trey Smith the best guard in the NFL right now? And frankly, is he the best guard by a decent little margin right now? I think you would say no. I mean, he can be in a discussion amongst those top guys, but he's not even Creed Humphrey, who I think is pretty cut and dried the best center in football. The real question in a contract negotiation is, are you the best guard on the open market right now? Are you the best guard lined up for a contract extension? And for Trey Smith, the only other argument I think this offseason was probably Joe Tooney, who ended up getting his money and less money from the Bears. I know you got the math for it. I know where you're going on it, and I like where you're headed. But I do think since you've had that salary cap number budgeted out this whole offseason, this wasn't an instance where you needed to bring his number way down to be able to do business, to sign draft picks, to sign other people in free agency. The Chiefs were able to kind of operate as usual with that big number for Trey Smith this year. You get a really big number in year one, and then down the line, I think the vision there is that his number is going to get, it's still going to be huge, but it's going to be palatable when you expect to see Trent McDuffie numbers kicking up into the future. Sauce Gardner gets his extension done today, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's just kind of about the bell curve of contract money. You have all this guaranteed in the front and in the middle, and you want to make sure that you're giving out big contracts that kind of hit consecutively more so than one big wallop all at once. And I think Trey Smith getting more money this year kind of helps that vision make sense to me.
So a lot more of Trey Smith I want to get into with you. I see Michael Donegan says, does this mean Trent and George not extended? We can talk about that, especially with Sauce Gardner's contract, which I think is fascinating because I think the initial reaction is, oh my bleep, that's so much money. They should have gotten Trent done earlier. Then you look at some of the guarantees, and I think you're left a little perplexed at why Sauce Gardner would have done some of this. We'll get into that and a lot more. But first, I do want to give a huge shout out to Factor because summer's here. More sun, more light, more time to do all the things that make summer so special. And you know what you don't want to do in the summertime? I don't want to cook. I don't want to be inside cooking. That is bleeping awful. But Factor is bleeping awesome. With Factor's chef-crafted, dietitian-approved meals ready in just 2 minutes, taking the hassle out of eating well. They arrive fresh and ready to eat, perfect for any active lifestyle over summer and beyond. With 45 weekly menu options, you can pick gourmet meals that fit your summer gains and goals. Choose your favorite options like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, Keto, a lot more. I truthfully love Factor. I've been a huge proponent of it. I've talked about it. This is something I really, really, really do stand by. The food is so much better than any other food, in my opinion, on the market that is prepackaged, healthy, sent to you, and you pop it in the microwave. Like when you cook this and you eat it, you think that this was in your oven for hours and you were cooking all day. And you're like, that took 2 minutes. I just had to pop that thing in during a radio break, and now I scarf that down, and I'm ready to take on this Trey Smith talk. I'm ready because of Factor, baby. And you can too, because you can get started right now at factormeals.com/arrowhead50 off. And if you use code Arrowhead50 off, you can get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. That's code Arrowhead50 off at factormeals.com/Arrowhead50 off for 50% off plus free shipping. Factormeals.com/Arrowhead50 off.
You want a little extra Factor seasoning just because I got it, just because I'm here with it, just because I didn't get to talk about them last time and they delivered a big, beautiful box of food on my door?
Yeah.
If you're the type of person, I can't stress enough, this isn't a health food box of sludge, whatever. It's delicious chef-crafted food, as Sterling has said. But one of the things that I do now in my life, I do read the labels. If I can get something that is individually packaged and it can have the carb information, because I got the diabetes, that determines how much like insulin I take on a day-to-day basis. I want to know what's in there. The problem is if you look at prepackaged stuff you get from the store, you look at the label and you go, okay, it's this many carbs and then 6 months worth of sodium. Fascinating. That can't be good for me. Every time with the factor packaging, I can look, I can know exactly what my carb situation is going to be, and I can say, oh, look at all the other good, wonderful, delicious things that are the healthful things that are in these factor meals. I'm also a big fan. They hooked me up with a bunch of low carb stuff whenever that shipment came in. Every single one was delicious. I got a bunch of different ones. It was unbelievable. I think Renee might have gotten to have one of them, but I think I might have gone 6 for 6 in retrospect. Really great product. I've had them before doing this show, and I'm glad they're a part of this show because it's nice to have some folks behind it who we can really get behind. It is delicious.
If you want to keep making sure we're in shape, you guys go and use Arrowhead 50 off, so that way they can stay on as long as possible because I bleep and love it. All right, let's talk Trey Smith because I want to say I bleep and love it. I bleep and love that he's still here in KC. I love that aspect of it. I think he is deserving of the money. I'm thrilled for Trey Smith, the guy, because he was a 6th rounder who had no idea if he was going to get drafted because of the medicals. There's that whole conversation of how a team called him and said, hey, man, we're going to pick you up as a UDFA. And then eventually the Chiefs called and said, hey, we're drafting you. Mm-hmm. And then he was thrilled because he went to KC. We know the talent was there. But, I mean, there was thoughts of, is he going to play football? Is he going to live? I mean, this was a serious medical issue that originally he had. Misdiagnosed or not, whether it was long-term or a more immediate aspect in college. Point is moot. He was a 6th rounder who missed out on a lot of money. So I am thrilled for Trey Smith. I am thrilled that a guy who has worked very, very hard has earned this opportunity and who has seemingly done everything the right way. Okay. But I can also point out he might be a top 10 guard in football. He is a top 10 guard in football, bordering maybe on the top 5, and also having questions about the contract situation itself with the lack of success running the football, and that's his strength. The Chiefs struggled to run the football, especially in short yardage situations, and you have the highest paid center in football. You now have the highest paid guard in football, and you had one of the higher paid guards in football who everyone always lauded as the best interior 3 in the NFL. And you still had some struggles. You still had some struggles with that tackle play or not. The point remains, however, the Chiefs were allocating their resources on the offensive line was not working. And so they're almost running it back. And that's my concern here. My other concern was before they even gave this contract to Trey Smith, before they even moved on from Joe Thuney. I said for the next 3 years, because this is a 4-year deal, $70 million guaranteed. It's basically a 3-year contract in the grand scheme of things, right? As we know how contracts traditionally work. Well, now we saw what Joe Thuney's contract extension looked like. You're looking at $17.5 million-ish per year. Trey Smith's $23.5 million per year. Trey Smith now only has to be Joe Thuney. He has to be $6 million per year better than Joe Thuney. It was why I said I would probably just extend Joe Thuney on that 3-year deal. It's going to be cheaper. And over the next 3 years, who do I think is going to be better? Joe Thuney. Now, the caveat comes in here is, okay, well, if Trey Smith looks really, really good over these 4 years and you're able to extend him yet again, and then you have him here in KC for about 7 years total, well, then, okay, I understand that thought process. That would make sense. But this was my concern all along, dude, in the words of the Big Lebowski, okay? This is my concern, dude. Over the next 3 years, he is $6 million more than Joe Thuney. He needs to be $6 million better than Joe Thuney over the next 3, and that's where I find it hard to believe it's going to happen.
Right. And there is just such a premium being put on Trey Smith there. And not to take it away from him, but kind of looking back in your kind of view of maybe they're kind of running it back this way. What it reminds me of now is it's sort of like paying Joe Thuney and drafting Trey Smith, but you now need Kingsley Suamataia to be like almost Trey Smith levels of good to retain that level. It was always going to be tough to come out of this offseason feeling like a winner on the interior offensive line. You got Creed done the year early, and you feel great about that. it seemed very unlikely that they would hold on to Tooney and Trey Smith for even one more year. Obviously, they could have with like the contracts they had, but they end up moving Tooney, and that trade capital and return ends up feeling kind of disappointing, and that disappears in the trade up for Noel Williams. And you go, okay, well, those scores have been settled. Now it is kind of just the salary. I don't know what the trade market would have been for Trey Smith. I'm guessing the Chiefs tried to find what that would have been pre-draft. After they traded Tooney, that was always off the table in my book. And certainly after the draft, it was off the table. I can understand how they ended up here. I see a vision of the future where the offensive line is able to be overall better while paying, let's say it's Creed, it's Trey Smith, and then Jalen Moore next year, not just this year, but next year at right tackle. You're hoping Josh Simmons is playing left tackle by then. If Simmons is playing left tackle and Kingsley Suamataia is playing left guard, and you have 2 of your starting 5 on rookie contracts, then the overall cost of your offensive line is something that you can manage. It's not the same as paying Tooney and Trey Smith and Creed Humphrey and Jawan Taylor and even like your Donovan Smith kind of numbers, which are not major 1-year deals, but like you have to allocate some veteran funds there to try to solidify that position. The Chiefs really need Kingsley Suamataia to work out this season for this season's sake. They also have a little bit of wiggle room now because imagine, I don't know if you were ever really worried that this deal wasn't going to get done. I always thought it would get done, but I thought it was interesting that this morning came around and it was still just sitting exactly where it had been sitting for a month as far as we could tell. But I did have that thought of like, well, if you play the tag out this year, you now must get starter level play from Kingsley, because now you're looking into next offseason saying, all right, well, now our starting guards are Kingsley and whoever we draft or a free agent or Mike Caliendo. If Kingsley strikes out for a second time in 2 years, you now have an offensive line that is like genuinely falling apart, because who's your left guard? Who's your right guard? You got Creed and you hope Josh Simmons is good. And beyond that, I mean, we're all just we're throwing darts and you're still hoping for Simmons. All that to say, I think this is a reasonable market deal for Trey Smith. It's a great payday for him. And I think this is what his value is because of the way that the salary cap moves. It always stresses me out when you're paying a guy elite position, record-breaking money while you're still projecting another step being taken. And that's what they're doing. They are anticipating another step or two for Trey Smith. To your point, they're anticipating him being better than Joe Tooney over the remainder of Joe Tooney's new deal in Chicago. And this year it's at Hollywood Brown's contract number. He's a little bit closer to $7 million than $6 million. But you say the difference between Trey Smith and Joe Tooney this year, that guy is Hollywood Brown in terms of what that difference in funds pays for. So I think it's totally fine. They say that sometimes a good compromise leaves everybody unhappy. I'll say I think Trey Smith ought to be thrilled with this deal. I don't know if the Chiefs are a little bit unhappy. They realized they got down to the wire and they had to give a little bit, because I don't see Trey Smith making a lot of concessions here. The other thing for the upside for him is a shorter deal, 4-year instead of a 5, means he does get to hit the market again in 4 seasons at the latest. It's a real 3-year deal for the Chiefs, and you're either renegotiating or you're moving on or you're playing out the lame duck here. But Trey Smith's going to get to hit the market again at a relatively young age, especially for a guard. He's going to get another chance at one of those deals, and he's getting paid very, very well now. So I think if we're going to do any like win-lose thing, I think Trey Smith won this negotiation. Seems to me like he got pretty much what he was hoping to get, maybe a concession here or there. The Chiefs signed it because they believe that Trey Smith is going to be a top 5 guard for the next 3 years.
Yeah, when you look at it, you're right. It feels like there wasn't much hometown love or discount there. Maybe there was, but when you
love, but no discount.
Yeah, when you shatter some of the guard records by a lot, not by a little, by a fairly substantial number, you won. Trey Smith won. Cliff Johnson, a couple comments I want to get to. Cliff Johnson says, love Tooney, but he's 32. Smith is 26. My opinion, younger, you perform well, the more value you have in the NFL. Yeah, but I guess my main point here is if the Chiefs only get these next 3 to 4 years from Trey Smith, It doesn't matter what he does after that.
Right.
Right. If they re-sign him for another 4 year and he's here in KC for 7-8 years, sure, then that deal would have worked out. But I guess my concern is, does he price himself out of Kansas City if he wants to renegotiate after 3 years? And then you're sitting here going, well, we could have just had Joe Thuney. And the age doesn't really make a massive difference at that point. I get what you're saying. That's been the main pushback I've seen. I guess my pushback to the pushback is, well, that means you almost have to extend Trey Smith after this contract for that age. And the age doesn't really make a massive difference at that point. I get what you're saying. That's been the main pushback I've seen. I guess my pushback to the pushback is, well, that means you almost have to extend Trey Smith after this contract for that.
It's never going to be a first, though. That's ridiculous.
And it's because Josh Simmons with Andy Heck and what we have seen from Andy over the past 5 seasons. We've not seen offensive line development. We have to keep going back to the Nick Allegrettis and Andrew Wileys who went into fine players, right? That's what we're talking now at this point. And so that's my question here is, we keep saying, well, he's young, he's going to improve. And he did take a slight step forward last year in pass pro. No denying that. But is that going to keep continuing? Because we've not necessarily seen that in recent years on the offensive line. That is my concern. Anything there you want to touch on, or are you?
Well, yeah,
you,
just
you good?
To that point. Projection's projection. I'm not projecting him to fall off or get exposed with Joe Thuney no longer there. Like, I think that you can do a likelihood chart, if you want, of projection and say, hey, there's a 10% chance Trey Smith's already peaked and it's something that he's about to decline from here, or freak injury, whatever, throw in your 10, your 20% chances there. And your 10% best case scenario could be that from this point forward, he becomes a pass blocking technician. His run game stuff never takes a step back. And for a decade, you extend him at the end of this deal and he's around for 10 years. And we're talking about him being one of the great Chiefs interior linemen of all time, side by side with Creed. The most likely outcome is that he's roughly the same guy that he was last year. Because to your point, he was roughly the same guy he was before. Little incremental improvements, and that's great. Being a great player, improving a little bit at a time can get you to elite. That's on the table, but we do, especially in moments like this, we do a lot of projecting the next step, and especially for a guard. I don't know what him getting to another level is going to visibly look like. And this isn't like an argument to never pay your interior linemen. I'm not in that camp by any means. And I think that Creed deal was great. But I think you've got to find your values and you've got to decide where you're willing to splurge. And the Chiefs are splurging to keep Trey Smith and Creed Humphrey together. I think they got value with Creed and they are paying market price, trying to impress your date at the seafood restaurant. I don't want to know what it's going to cost. I want Trey Smith for the next 4 seasons. And the Chiefs have put their card down for that.
So, one, I see this comment from Slam and Sammy Joe. I don't think another team would have paid him this much. I do. I think this is actually about exactly what we would have gotten on the open market. I think this is about to be damn close to what we would have saw. I mean, there was a lot of talk about teams and the Bears specifically wanting to, like, how much would they pay Trey Smith if he hits free agency? Like, I think this was in line with almost exactly with what he was going to see on the open market. And if I want to play devil's advocate and do what the Chiefs are trying to do here, and what I think that maybe some thought process here is, Patrick's better when there's not pressure up the middle. Mm-hmm. Now, we know about the tackles. We get that. You can't be that bad. Then it doesn't matter at all. Right. It doesn't matter how good the interior is or the tackles are that bad. But we know if Patrick has some time in the middle, he thrives. But it's not just that. When you look around the NFL today, you're seeing the evolution of the pass rush coming up the middle and not just off of the edge. Mm-hmm. There's only one Chris Jones. There's a lot more in that ilk now than even 5 years ago. Look at the money explosion on the interior pass rushers versus even outside. It's starting to become more and more concentrated on the Quinn and Williams guys of the world, the obviously the Chris Jones, but you look around and it's almost surprising how much money is now being spent on D tackles who can get a pass rush up the middle. And so if you're KC, you're going, we see that trend. We think that the guard market is going to explode soon. Maybe even the center market. So we are going to get out in front, and while it looks massive right now with Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith, we think that eventually that's going to be the market value for these guys. That's the thought process I could take if I want to try and take a positive spin for the Chiefs camp side of things. I don't know if it's true or not. I don't necessarily believe that a ton, because I don't think anyone's passing Creed for a while, because he really got up there, which I have no issue with. When you are the best player at your position by far, that's fine. I'm okay with the money he's making. But I do wonder if it's a thought process that Chiefs were having, that with the amount of money and talent and development on interior pass rushers, you got to have guys who can stop up the middle, which means guards become more valuable.
I think there are two kind of interesting things from that, between the comment there and your angle on it. One is just that, like, I agree other teams would have paid him this. And just to be clear, like, having two teams involved in the negotiations would have led to one team outbidding the other at some point, and then somebody Shark Tank style says, I'm out. And then you sign the deal that's remaining and you move on, right? So I do think that this is just about where he would have ended up on the open market. The one thing that does underline for me is that the Chiefs did not get a deal here, and not like a hometown discount deal. They didn't get a we have you under contract deal, at least not a particularly good one, a leverage deal, right? Which they got for Creed. Hey, we're paying you a year early, and we're still going to we're going to reset this market, and we're going to pay a center with something centers aren't always getting paid. But Creed Humphrey on the open market, I think, would have gotten a few extra $1 million per year than what he ended up getting with the Chiefs, and all, like maybe just a couple extra $1 million. Again, the Chiefs just kind of paid the premium to get Trey Smith. The like interior shakeup and the way that you build for modern defenses, I think, is interesting. That ebbs and flows with the way that the league brings in new talent and how positions get valued on each side of the ball. They certainly impact the other one. But the thing that I'm a little bit concerned about is that I'd argue the guard market already did explode. That we're in what? I don't know for sure. I don't have the full list of this up, but we are 3 or 4 years into some really big guard contracts. Maybe it's 2 or 3, but I get the feel. I think the last 3 off seasons have had some real jumps in what the top tier guards have gotten paid. And it feels a little bit like the Chiefs just paid, again, top tier price for Trey Smith. I don't think it's going to go down significantly from here, but I think this is probably relatively near the peak for what guards get paid.
Yeah. At least for now. I mean, in 10 years, we thought 5 years ago, Christian Kirk's money was absurd. And now you're seeing almost every wide receiver, even wide receiver twos, get insane money. Now, again, I know Christian Kirk at that point hadn't done what a lot of guys had done, but that was also, I think, the Jacksonville tax of the Jags being asked, not a big markets team. And some teams have to pay the tax to get guys there. But the point remains, now you're seeing Garrett Wilson with $31 million per year, Terry McLaurin once in that range. We thought 20 mil was insane. Will we see $30 million guards in 10 years?
Oh, less than that. Yeah, I think we're going to see a $30 million guard in 5 years, most likely, because the cap is always going up. But the problem there is that the long-term extensions, again, like having them locked in for a long period of time is the thing that gives you value for paying early. The Chiefs are eating this cap hit right out of the gate. So the Chiefs aren't getting the benefit of, again, that the Trey money later on will look good, but they're not getting the long tail of like, well, we're going to coast on being way under market value for Trey Smith in years 2, 3, 4. Again, those numbers being lower back there is nice. This year's number, though, is so large that it's doing the opposite strategy of what they usually do in terms of trying to capitalize on the fact that the cap always rises. So the cap will keep going up. Trey Smith will not be the highest paid guard in football probably this time next year. I'm guessing that he'll get past, I don't know who's set up for it yet. I don't know if there's a huge name who's ready for an extension just yet.
Lindstrom already has his contract. Landon Dickerson already has his contract. I'll have to go through, but yeah, there's a couple of big guys have already had their large deals.
And so we'll see if he gets past in a year or if it takes 2. I'd be shocked if he doesn't end up getting past in a couple, because I assume the cap keeps going up and up and up and up and up forever. Still in the moment the Chiefs are in right now, they are paying the most premium price you could pay for a guy at his position.
Let's bring this into the conversation of what this means for the rest of the team and some specific players going forward. Because we all know the Jawaan Taylor contract coming off the books at the end of this year. They could keep him for one more year. They're not. That would be the most shocking thing I think we would have all seen, right, with Jawaan Taylor. So his contract coming off of the books. But you also still have a decent contract for Jalen Moore, right? There's a decent chunk going to Moore. Now you have Humphrey. Now you have Smith. We'll see with the guards of Kingsley Suamataia and the tackle of Josh Simmons and how they end up playing. You now already have Nick Bolton under contract. You have Chris Jones with a long-term large contract. Obviously, Mahomes is the biggest of the bunch. Travis Kelce will probably be coming off that contract. Maybe he plays in their year and he decides to come back. We'll find out. But now you're starting to get into the conversation of, okay, well, McDuffie. Okay, well, George Karlaftis. We haven't seen anything from FAU. A minute who's on a short-term deal. Mike Dana's not going to take over that role. So Karlaftis, I think, is actually paramount. You're paying decent money for Christian Fulton. I like the deal. I like the move, but still, it's $10 million per year, 2-year deal. I just start Rashee Rice as well eventually. Like, I think that may be the most underrated one that no one talks about. We keep talking about Karlaftis and McDuffie, but eventually that Rice contract, because when you're looking at wide receiver contracts in the NFL, they are absurd. And then the Sauce Gardner contract just came out. Let me go ahead and just pull it up really quick because I thought it was interesting. Sauce Gardner signed a 4-year, $120.4 million extension. I thought it originally was 60 guaranteed. The new updated one, at least according to Adam Schefter, is $85.65 million guaranteed.
Yes, the guaranteed numbers have climbed the last little bit, it seems like.
So, Derek Stingley, 3-year, $30 million extension. McDuffie's in that range. McDuffie is in the same range as Sauce Gardner and Derek Stingley, even if the name NFL-wide might not be as popular because McDuffie keeps his head down. Stingley kind of does too. Sauce Gardner, he's out and about. His persona, his ego, his name brand is
I think you're
there.
giving him a little bit of problems because he got drafted by the Jets, honestly. Like, he's not like a head case. He just ended up in the market that was ready to like feature.
Oh, I wasn't trying to say a head case.
I was saying in terms of the way that he gets painted, I think.
Oh, no, I think you're right. If I painted him that way, I was trying to say he's a good marketing PR.
He's flashier. He's flashier.
He's flashy.
Yeah,
I mean, the sauce chain, all that. Like, McDuffie's behind the scenes. He goes about his business. But it ain't going to come down to that means he's going to get a deal. He's going to be getting paid $30 million per year. Then what's Karlaftis going to end up getting? You're looking at defensive end contracts. The Chiefs have 3 massive players at premium positions with contracts coming up, and they have the now highest paid guard in the NFL. That was where my concern was originally arising here.
Right.
I don't know where you're at here, but if this were to hammer...
Deep breath?
No.
We're going to be okay. Is Patrick Mahomes still on the football team?
No nuance.
Tuesdays with Stu, no Stu-wants? Maybe, Stu-wants. How about a little Stu-wants for you? Sterling made it. Sterling, you mind if I give you a little Stu-wants here? There's only so many premium contracts you can realistically give out while still having like a middle class in your football team, right? And you can't stars and scrubs or stars and rookie contracts is a tough way to go in a game that has as much attrition as football. I think this is the end for Jawaan Taylor in Kansas City. That seems incredibly obvious. And I think it is very, very, very likely the end for George Karlaftis. I guess there's a chance the Chiefs surprise us by the order they go in. And I think you're right to mention Rashee Rice in this conversation. He really does get kind of left out of this. He doesn't have the 5th-year option as a second-round pick. So maybe that's kind of the thing that's kind of kicked. Like, oh, maybe there's an extra year. There's not an extra year. The Rashee Rice clock is ticking much more loudly than you think it is. Because, again, we just don't really talk about him that way. And I think we will now that the Trey Smith deal is done. This was the next domino the Chiefs clearly had in line to fall. But as the dominoes go, I think they're right now. I didn't even tweet this because I wasn't trying to start a fight with anybody, and I don't really want to have a screenshot come back around in 10 months. But right now, I think I would take the under on $30.1 million AAV for Trent McDuffie. The logic of it, and I would not be saying this if I was his agent. If I was his agent, I'd say, hey, next guy gets paid $1 more. That's kind of the precedent here. And that's kind of what Trey Smith has gotten here on. Hey, I'm not asking you to compare me to the best edge rushers in football. Compare me to the best guards in football. What's the line? Pay me more than that. The Chiefs haven't given out a lot of those deals. Hey, we're going to make you the highest paid player at your position. In fact, very, very few of those deals, even for guys who are like up in that category, right?
They've had 4 now. 5
This
now.
is this the who count me down.
This is number 5. Patrick.
But for
an
hour, right? For an hour.
At the time.
Right.
At the time. Patrick, Travis, Chris Jones.
When did Kelsey become the highest paid? That was his last contract, I believe, was the first one that made him the highest paid player.
Yes, but it still happened.
2-year deal.
Agreed, but it still happened.
At age 34.
I'm not disagreeing, but
I'm going to explain.
It happened.
I'm going to explain why.
Chris Jones.
Chris Jones in the most tumultuous negotiation in team history.
Trey Smith.
New.
Creed Humphrey.
And Creed, right. Creed to me was breaking the mold here because it is a young player on the ascension who is in that cycle of I'm close to free agency and you're either going to make me the highest paid guy or I'm going to hit free agency. Mahomes was an early payment and Travis Kelce was a please don't retire.
And by the way,
and we've been underpaying you for years for Kelce.
Agreed. No, and I'm not saying I have issues with those. I'm not saying
not at all.
My point was the Chiefs, I don't think, are afraid to do it, although Jerry Jones always gets the nod that he's the guy that makes the highest paid players, that he's the guy to do it. Quite frankly, it actually has been Veach and Clark Hunt. They've had it more times than I think other people have realized. And also, wouldn't you also point out, where was Joe Thuney? Joe Thuney may have been the highest paid guard. He was at least top 3.
He was very high, and that's as a free agent. My point in here is that Butker was, and that was, yeah. And if you like having Harrison Butker, I remember talking about, hey, is Harrison Butker worth $8 million? I hope you enjoy that. That's another contract that is the space between Joe Thuney and Trey Smith.
By the way, the answer is yes. Butker's worth that money.
We'll find out, I guess. But the tendencies of this team has been to, hey, let me pay you a lot of money, and we want to keep you happy, we want to keep you here, but we're not going to bleed every dollar because we've got bigger fish to fry. I can't remember where this conversation started now. What was the jumping off point of this?
The jumping off point was the Chiefs need to pay Rashee Rice, Karlaftis, and McDuffie.
Right. When you do make those payments, and the reason that I like the Creed deal, the reason I'm a little bit lukewarm right now, you absolutely must be right. Your margin for error shrinks to nothing when you cash those full dollar amount checks. I think obviously Rashee Rice isn't going to end up getting like Jamar Chase money and Justin Jefferson money. He's not going to end up in that class. George Karlaftis is not comparing himself to Myles Garrett. These are not going to be resetting at the position. McDuffie's going to be around there, but I think they're going to try. And also, you pay the guys early, you tend to get a discount off of that. Hey, we're not going to drag this down to the final hour, or which is what they did with Trey Smith today, essentially.
They had hours,
and they'd already used the tag and been sitting on that for a long time. My hunch is that they're going to try to slot McDuffie in under Sauce. And right under that $30-ish million range, but I don't know for sure, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, either way, when you pay non-premium positions and you're setting records at these positions, it's going to make your life harder for Veach. Right. But what have we learned? Veach has traditionally figured it out. I know we've had some criticisms of some specific deals or specific picks, but let's be real now. He's gone to 3 straight Super Bowls and built this entire thing. He had, Andy Reid, all that stuff, but like Brett Veach has found ways. Anytime we've said that it's going to get harder, he's traditionally found ways to make it work. And again, I hated the Jawan Taylor contract. They found ways to, with him under contract, go to back-to-back Super Bowls in those 2 years, right? And they're going to be favorites this year. So yes, I'm not going to love or be enamored by every single deal, but end of the day, Veach has shown the ability that even if it does not work, this team is still going to be probably the favorite to win the Super Bowl. So I do have to have some of that, and I don't always love the moniker, the faith in Veach and all that stuff, or
Veach, all of this is a Patrick Mahomes stance for me. I mean,
to an extent, but he's done a great job replenishing talent, whether it's in the draft or finding ways. And yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe eventually it hits a wall and it won't continue, right? Maybe it won't. But every time we're like, no, that's dumb. Tyreek Hill, how do you trade him? Worked out pretty damn well, right? How can you move on from Tyrann Mathieu to Justin Reed, which I, by the way, at the time didn't like the Justin Reed contract. Didn't like it. I was like, you're giving Justin Reed that much money? He hasn't been that good in Houston. He's been okay. And then he helped reshape and change the culture defensively for the Chiefs, and I'm sad to see him go. But at the same time, they know when to walk on guys, especially in the secondary. They've done it time and time again. They knew when to walk on L'Jarius. They knew that they couldn't keep paying Charvarius Ward because of Trent McDuffie and L'Jarius. They knew when it was time to walk on Tyrann Mathieu. They probably waited a little too long on Dan Sorensen. They knew when to walk on Juan Thornhill. They've done a pretty damn good job in that regard. So as much as I'm a little concerned about the Trey Smith contract, I will trust the guy who's laid the blueprint to have the most successful era ever in Kansas City.
This always makes me end up sounding like a Brett Veach hater, which I'm absolutely not. I feel like Brett Veach, we've talked about this. We did a whole show on this. Brett Veach is like a top 5 general manager in the league. And I know you get really upset when it's not like top 2. I don't really care. I'm not that interested because I think the ebbs and flows of a year to year, give me one of the 5 general managers who knows for sure what they're doing and has kept the level consistently, and I'm happy. Veach is clearly in that class. I also think Patrick Mahomes takes, 25 NFL rosters to a playoff spot at minimum. Maybe it's 30, maybe it's 25 of those teams win a playoff game with Patrick Mahomes. So like Veach got the most important part of team, if not like NFL history, correct when he banged the table for Patrick Mahomes. He also still gets credit for that. But now you're playing on a slightly easier difficulty because you have the greatest quarterback of your generation locked in, helming the entire thing. Veach also gets credit for the Mahomes contract in my book. Like that was creatively done, and he was the guy that was leading the charge on that. As far as I know, huge props there. I don't think this Trey Smith deal is a disaster. I think it's fine. I understand how they got there. But I would say I think it's almost impossible to give Patrick Mahomes too much credit for where the Chiefs are at right now.
No, but I guess the pushback I give is, yes, Patrick Mahomes is one of one, but Josh Allen's close too. Mm-hmm. And if you look at how those rosters, but if you saw how the rosters were built, who are you going with? You're going with the Chiefs roster over the Bills roster. Lamar Jackson's great. He's not Mahomes. Again, I just think that Brett Veach almost deserves more credit. You and I differ a little bit in this regard.
The Bills and Ravens would both have a Super Bowl if Patrick Mahomes was their quarterback. I think that's all. I believe that definitively. I mean, maybe I guess you could be a huge Lamar fan who might disagree. You wouldn't want to like give Lamar that dig. And I think Andy Reid and Josh Allen and Andy Reid and Lamar Jackson probably have a Super Bowl. I think that's about where I'd settle that in.
I guess for me, it's just the perfect culmination here in Kansas City. I do think Veach and Reed and Mahomes are the 3-headed monster that helps this create what we're witnessing unfold before our very eyes. Again, we just have a little bit of a different opinion there. I guess I give more credit to Veach.
I do too. I just think he's clearly third on that 3-headed monster, which I think is no slight. Hope that. I think Brett Veach might say that. I don't know. Maybe in a quiet moment he might want to fight back about it. But like, I think in my order, Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, and Brett Veach are the reasons for this dynasty. The top 3 reasons for this dynasty, and I'm putting Brett Veach up there, maybe like right there with Travis Kelce in terms of, I guess, we want to add more players into the mix, and Chris Jones. Hugely important. And Veach kept those guys together. Again, this is the thing now with Trey Smith. Brett Veach has found great value in the draft. He has continued to keep the roster healthy throughout, and he's picked the right guys by and large to give the big payout to. Now Trey Smith's the new test of that last point. Again, I think
So
Brett Veach deserves a ton of credit.
let's end here, because I think this is an interesting conversation we've had. We're going to obviously talk a lot more about this all off season, and honestly, this Trey Smith contract talk will be now at the forefront because he's no longer a lovable 6-rounder with a medical concern. That look how great he's playing. Now, when you have that penalty that you see, it's not glossed over. It's how can the highest paid guard in the NFL do something like that? Yeah. Right?
Still
That's
lovable,
a conversation
though.
to have.
Still seems like he's an absolutely delightful guy.
He is
very
definitely
happy for him.
All right. You did not love the Joe Thuney contract originally.
Correct.
I remember that.
Correct.
And you changed your Thuney.
I indeed I did.
Which again, I'm giving you credit here because you saw that and go, you know what? No, I know at the time I didn't love the contract. Look at what it ended up being. That worked out.
Yep.
So
very much
this could 100% work out, even if we have our questions right now. We're not saying it's not going to, because it did work with Joe Thuney.
Yeah.
But where does Trey Smith, what level does he have to play at for these next 3 to 4 years where you think this contract was worth it? Because that's going back to the Joe Thuney conversation that we had 4 years ago.
I need him to be a top 10 pass protecting guard. I think that's the line that I like consistently throughout those next 3 years. I want to be reasonable and specific, because if I just say all pros, Pro Bowls, Pro Bowl voting, the guard in front of Patrick Mahomes is going to get a little boost. All pros, Trey Smith is building his reputation. Good for him. I have no doubts about what he's going to be as a run blocker. I think if he goes from being, I don't know if you have, I'm kind of pulling numbers out of thin air here, but if you say right now, Trey Smith's top 5 run blocking guard in football, and maybe he's top 1 or 2, right? Just round numbers. Top 5 run blocker right now and a top 25 pass pro guard. Be top 5 and top 10, respectively, and I think it's probably worth that money. I want to see him reach a near elite level as a pass protector next to Creed Humphrey, which I think could also improve when Jawan Taylor's not at right tackle anymore, because that fit has always been very, very strange. Just the two of them in space seem to operate completely differently. So for me, it is just, can Trey Smith give you 85% of Joe Thuney as a pass protector? And if so, if you're going to use him in the running game, I think this deal will be fine. It won't be a steal for the Chiefs. If he's the best guard in football over the next 3 years, this is a really good deal.
Yeah.
That seem reasonable?
I think that's fair. And what's funny is I would love to know like the inflation of everything and how it actually breaks down. We can do the cap percentage at some point. But of Joe Thuney, because we had the same conversation, like, well, with that contract, he better be a top 3 guard in football. And he was number 1. And so I'm not saying that deal was a steal, but it was kind of a steal when you look at that Joe Thuney contract in retrospect, especially with what he did when he had to kick out to left tackle. Trey Smith, it's like, well, that can't be a steal no matter what. And then if he turns up being the top 3 guard in football or the number 1 guard in football, we'll sit here. If he ends up being Chris Lindstrom, we'll be like, kick out to left tackle. Trey Smith, it's like, well, that can't be a steal no matter what. And then if he turns up being the top 3 guard in football or the number 1 guard in football, we'll sit here. If he ends up being Chris Lindstrom, we'll be like, no.